Happy Friday, or when everyone sees this, it's going to be Monday. This is it, Callum McLean with Pilosity and James Reid from Dinsmore doing our Wine on Wednesday. And today, we're joined by Sara Best from Integrate. Now, Sarah's going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, emotional well-being and intelligence, right? So when it comes to the emotion part on the Wine on Wednesday, I'm sure I've got that covered, and James definitely has the intelligence part. So, so between the two of us, we got it covered. But Sara, this is kind of where you live and breathe, right? I mean, how important is emotional intelligence right now for people, for HR directors specifically, welcoming employees back from an 8-week furlough? I mean, there's going to be a gigantic range of emotions. Some are going to be happy. Some are going to be kind of really bitter and resentful. How can people get ahead of this and kind of prepare?
It's essential. You're right, Callum. It's always important. I mean, emotional intelligence is, in fact, how we navigate the demands and pressures of life. And they have definitely increased over the last several weeks, months. The intensity and the complexity of what we're dealing with has increased. But I mean, let's just be safe. It would be safe to say that emotional intelligence has always been important. We just maybe haven't been as aware of it as we could be or should be. And just to start out with a simple definition, emotional intelligence is a set of skills and abilities that we can use to navigate this external world, how we interface with the world and with people. We all have some degree of emotional intelligence. We're born with it. Our life experiences help us mature and develop capacities in emotional intelligence. It is measurable. So science helps us understand and be able to calibrate our skills and abilities. But it's how we adapt. We are uniquely wired, each one of us, with these behavioral drives, very natural behavioral drives. And they're functional, they're good, they're useful, there's strength in that. But we also present a challenge for ourselves and other people based on just how we're naturally wired. I'll use myself as an example. I'm fairly impulsive. I have very low patience. I like action and variety. I'm also a very subjective decision maker. So it's all about how it feels. And sometimes if the data even suggests, no, you shouldn't do that, I'm over here going, but I want to, and I think I will. So there's some capacity we need to help us, kind of manage and mitigate the potential risk we create for ourselves and other people just by our natural behavioral drives. So I became interested in emotional intelligence probably about 25 years ago because I recognized from what people were saying and doing that there's something more to our success. It's not just how smart you are. And I was one of those people, I did okay in school. I mean, I wasn't at the top of the class. I was in a school environment where there was a lot of people, there were many, many people at the top of the class, but I knew that wasn't just it. I mean, those people did great with the books stuff, but they didn't necessarily do so well with the other stuff, the life stuff, people stuff.
James, you got a point here, right?
I got many points.
I just have them.
Well, one is they always said it, that the C students are always the CEOs someday. So obviously there's a story there that I would love to hear, why that quote is true. But two, the elephant in the room to me for an HR or a lawyer or any business owner is you're basically taught not to stereotype and judge a book by its cover. And your basically whole model is we should stereotype, we should understand them, and it's fine to ignore facts and take a subjective risk if that is who you are.
Yeah, yes to all of that. We should understand how we're naturally wired. We should, however, not presume to understand what people need to be successful, but it's been proven. I mean, research has been proven, and it's been tested and retested, that these competencies give people an edge. They give people an edge in relationship success. They give people an edge in terms of how far they can go with their career or with their leadership ability. But let's just say too, given what we're dealing with today, they also give people an edge in terms of their health and well-being. So people that lack emotional intelligence or lack the capacity to manage their emotions they're at a serious disadvantage. They're susceptible.
I'm going to bring up a personal story on this one. So I'm not going to say who it is, but I had a boss who had zero emotional intelligence, like none. He thought he didn't really. So I can imagine a boss with no emotional intelligence trying to manage me during this COVID crisis. Yeah, it would not have gone well.
Right.
But right now that my current boss is very emotionally intelligent, and he's been able to see, he's able to manage everyone to their correct personality type, right? So the team dynamic is doing really well right now, and we're all as happy as we possibly could be right now. It's not great, but it's way better than it would be if we didn't have someone that didn't have that kind of control, or understanding. So how can an HR director go, all right, I'm going to be over the next 3 weeks, hopefully, welcoming back the majority of my workforce. How do they know which personality type fits what person? And is it legitimate? Because I took your PI test and it came back as a maverick, right? Which I was not happy about. But I did read it. Yeah, it's kind of spot on, right? It's kind of annoyingly spot on. So, but from an HR standpoint, it really hit the mark. So if they're not taking your PI test, what can HR managers do to kind of read the individual and kind of get a handle on what they're going to be dealing with?
Sure. That's a great question. I thought for a minute we were going to kind of go down the road of let's diagnose what a maverick is really all about and how emotional intelligence can support maverick, says our other maverick in the room or in the conversation.
There you go. I think you should briefly explain what that means to people that you know.
Yeah, what are the different types?
Sure. Well, there are according to Predictive Index, there are 17 different reference profiles or kind of behavioral neighborhoods. You happen to live in the behavioral neighborhood called Maverick. And it's marked, both of you do actually, it's marked by high dominance, a high need to influence and control things, lower, slightly lower, but still high extroversion where you are focused on people, working at a very faster than average pace. So a drive to get results, competitive, initiative taking, very proactive, also flexible, spontaneous, and bristly around structure and order and the need to comply. So I think signature to the Maverick profile is this need to have freedom from rigid structure and this need to, be able to kind of go where your energy goes and to kind of call the shots. There's a lot of confidence in that Maverick profile. So when it comes to adapting and understanding those kind of intense drives, what helps a person who's a Maverick is to create self-awareness. So these are competencies of emotional intelligence. What's happening with me? Why do I feel the way I feel? Next, how about a little empathy? What's happening with the people around me? When we have good empathy, which is a tactical ability, by the way, it's not just a touchy-feely concept. Oh, I care about you. It's, I'm trying to read and understand what you are experiencing and not assign judgment to it. So I can respond to it appropriately. Self-awareness, empathy, and then what we call emotional expression. Because P.S., we feel feelings all day long. And when we feel those feelings, there are thoughts that accompany those feelings. We have to be able to be in tune with both so we can manage them. And it's important for people to share thoughts and feelings. When we try to separate them out or think that we don't have emotions, we're the only ones who think that. Everyone else around us is watching it play out on our face, with our body language. So when you think about a good boss or a good HR director who has emotional intelligence, this is a person who's in tune with, this is what's going on with me, and I need to kind of manage that. Otherwise, it's going to impact the people around me in a not so positive way.
Oh, for sure.
Strong emotions. And so to your question, Callum, about, what can an HR director do? The first thing an HR director needs to do is, put their mask on first. Like, take care of yourself, know what's happening with you. I see people in the HR profession in particular who are very driven to do things right. And they don't want to let anybody down. They're working on perfection and precision, and they throw so much of themselves into what they're doing, which is a little different than the Maverick profile. You're motivated in a different way, but these folks, you know, can burn out quickly. Their health is going to suffer because they'll sacrifice their own well-being, and sometimes not even be aware of it, to try to make sure, you know, the T's are crossed and the things are in place as they need to be.
That's a great point. I talk to HR directors all the time right now, and they are breaking and cracking, and they are self-sacrificing themselves and their own well-being. And I keep telling them, we need you to be in a good place, because we're relying upon you to help bring everyone back and let them know everything's okay. And if you're not in one piece, it's going to be a really bumpy ride when everyone starts coming back.
Indeed it is. May I permission to share my screen for a moment?
Yeah, what you got?
Please do.
I'm going to show, so for the HR director, they're experiencing what we see here, and so are the people that they're responsible for. Ooh, let's get that guy off of there. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that will, there we go. These would be commensurate with the phases of a crisis. The grief stages also look very similar to this. We call this the change curve. And what you'll notice is, you know, there's a dip in vitality. This is what I think has been happening over the last 2 months. When COVID first really hit hard and we had to shift, and there was this incredible disruption to everything that we know. We moved from stage 1 to stage 2. Like, oh my gosh, the shock is starting to wear off. There is a major disruption. We know we're having to shift people to the home front to work. We have to shut down our plant. We have to lay off people. So inside of that disruption, there's a dip in vitality and well-being. There are strong emotions that are happening, and you know, it's a downward motion. So at the bottom of the change curve, you see things like frustration and disenchantment, even despair. You know, we heard and even now hear people feeling that despair. Then as you move into that next stage, which is exploration, okay, what is this really producing? What is this going to look like? How can I be helpful? What happens is we can move from despair into even a bit of hope or optimism, because we're figuring out how to make something work. So I've seen that happen over the last 2 months, where people initially found themselves in that stage 2, some still in stage 1 for several weeks, like, whoa, wait a minute. Like this is just going to go away. This is not for real. Then they found themselves in what we call the vortex, or that circle in the middle of the diagram. You know, wouldn't it be great if we could just sort of jump from stage 1 over to stage 4 and not have to experience the emotions? But that's really not how we're wired. So we find ourselves down at the bottom, but then, hey, you know, these Zoom meetings are working out pretty well for my team, or we're having a lot more productivity than we did even when we were in the office. Or, you know, we have such demand, we've had to hire people for our company. So they start to get energized by being in the fight, if you will. That happens in that exploration stage. And then most recently, I've talked to people who find themselves pretty solidly in the rebuilding stage, or at least they did about a week ago, because they had become comfortable and familiar with whatever that mid-range normal was, what's been going on for the last 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that's changing again. So the rebuilding phase is much more optimistic, hopeful. People are fired up, perhaps, or they're figuring out, hey, I can do this, or we can do this. But then they quickly realize, hey, but what I was counting on isn't actually playing out that way. Here are new dynamics, that new things I have to meet requirements for. So they find themselves all the way back at stage 1 again. Or one last example, in the midst of all this happening, you know, and I've heard people say this, such a mix of emotion. I feel such gratitude for being able to be with my kids, for example, probably older kids more than younger kids who need a lot of help with their homework. I happen to be blessed to be in the older kid category. So gratitude about the pace and how it slowed down and what they're able to do with each day, yet guilt and shame and frustration around, hey, I'm okay, but someone I care about isn't. So this wicked sort of cycle or vortex of strong emotions happening, yet we're supposed to keep functioning. We're supposed to keep getting up in the morning and brushing our teeth and putting our clothes on and making stuff happen. So it's really unthinkable, some of the things that people are having to deal with. So For HR directors, it is first important to know, where are you on this change curve? And what do you need to do to make sure you're healthy, you're okay, and you can navigate successfully?
James, where are you, when you're talking to a lot of your clients right now, where do you think they're coming up on this curve?
I think that they are ready to get toward creativity, but they're going back to frustration a lot because the order gets extended and what they think may be happening gets delayed, or there's some other hiccup in the road. So I feel like there's still a lot of frustration, but I think that, you know, the way I see the stock market is they're kind of going back to the hope now. So I do see, you know, some good signs of where people are at overall in the stock market.
Yep. Yep. I'm finding a lot of people still in the frustration as well. Just like, we still don't know what it's going to look like. We're not quite at the creative. There's a lot of white collar clients that have a remote workforce that are usually better at working remotely. You don't need as much supervisions, but for those blue collar guys, they're still pretty much frustrated, and they're not quite, you don't have a clear pathway to get creative and accept it and start building the hope out. So now there's a guy called, what, help me out here, Dr. Travis, what was it?
Bradbury?
Yeah, that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now he was the guy that kind of really started emotional intelligence with his book, right? EQ.
Actually, it was Daniel Goleman back in about the late 90s, early 2000s. And I'm not sure how long Travis Bradbury's been in the mix too. His stuff is fantastic. We have so many great contributors to this science of, you know, managing and optimizing our emotions.
Simon Sinek is a newer one. Simon Sinek's a newer one that's coming out as well, right? That's a great job.
Yeah, and you know, anything we can do to find ways, you know, to like identify those emotions and then be able to cope and manage those emotions. For a lot of us, you know, well, let me say it this way. There are many reasons, varied reasons why we struggle sometimes. And it could be because we're much more perfectionistic and we can't put our finger on what exactly is success. Might be one of those things. But in all of this, things like TED Talks, we've got Brene Brown. She's got a fantastic set of TED Talks about vulnerability and shame. Because let's be honest, there are levels of emotion, and shame and guilt, they're down there at the lowest levels. But we kind of cover those up with things like anger, and fear is kind of underneath that anger. Frustration and anger make a nice protective layer for us not to necessarily have to deal with some of those strong emotions we may be feeling. And if I may, direct to that leader you talked about, for HR directors to know and appreciate, you know, the various levels of self-awareness will lend themselves to a person's capability, you know, to understand and appreciate what's going on with everyone else. So as an individual, if I'm an HR director and I'm getting really, really good at understanding how I roll and how difficult things challenge me, and I find ways to cope and deal with that, you know, talking to friends, exercising, spiritual practices, mindfulness, whatever it happens to be that helps you find that groove again of healthiness and productivity, then we know that others need to be doing the same thing. I think it's super powerful.
Yeah, from my side, looking at the Maverick, it shows me what my tendencies are, and it also shows how to work best with me, right? And I think for someone that might not be in a position where they can go, hey, Sarah, why don't you come over to our company? We've got 300 people. Let's put them all through the PI and I can get it all together. I don't know. Would it be an idea to have the HR director or some of the supervisors do it? And then if they feel okay with it, distribute what their score was so that other people know how to come and talk to them. Because I was surprised that some of the things that I might have bristled at before, after my manager saw my PIs, like, oh yeah, oh, that's totally understandable. Now I know how to bring something up that I've been struggling with, and Callum takes it in a much better way than before.
Absolutely. We say data, not drama. So
Yeah.
the behavioral profile allows us to look at behavioral data as opposed to making up stories or having assumptions about one another. It is always valuable to know and understand who's around you. And I'll tell you what, if you're a leader, the responsibility on your shoulders to adapt and help the people around you do the best they can do, that responsibility is high. That burden is the greatest for the leader. That not only do I have to understand myself, but I also have to be willing to adapt a little bit so that I can help you have what you need to be successful. Like feedback, for example, praise and encouragement. Sometimes, we operate from our own natural drive. So if yours are different than mine, it's not going to occur to me that you might need something different from me as a leader. Clarity, lots of details, being available to answer questions, to talk instead of email back and forth. There's simple things, but I guess, Callum, to your point, any way that we can gather that behavioral data and embrace it and understand it about each other, we're going to perform better together. We're also going to be a little less stressed and more successful, more fulfilled.
James?
True, but to play devil's advocate, I've experienced people that either do have high emotional intelligence or think they do, and they use it in a way that they aren't sincere. So like if somebody games me and says, James, I bet you can't do the dishes in 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden I'm like a puppy because I'm competitive and they know that it gets me to do the dishes, they're gaming me. I'm eventually going to catch on to them gaming me. Or two, if they ask me how I'm doing, but I learn from their style that they don't actually care at all and don't even want to talk to me, I know they're being fake and knowing how to game me. So I'm losing trust.
Yeah, you make a really good point, James. You can't fake authenticity. You certainly can't fake empathy. People do know how to read through that. One of the things that is most helpful when a person develops emotional intelligence is that ability to be vulnerable and honest. People who can say, oh, I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. I told you I was going to do that and I didn't. Leaders who are able to say, you know what, you have a better idea than I do. Let's go with that idea. I like where you're going with this. Leaders that say, I don't know, or wow, I really threw you under the bus in that meeting. I'm sorry. That kind of vulnerability is the best way to build trust. But the only way to get to that kind of vulnerability is to embrace and understand who you are. What's naturally great about you, definitely where you create obstacles for other people, and then get really comfortable with letting that be known. I think the other bad news is people know it anyways. When they know that we know, that's a thumbs up.
Can we stop sharing the screen? I like to see you a bit bigger.
Oh, sure.
You're off on the side there. I agree with that, but I don't know. I think people are going to game the system no matter what. Right? Because you give them a roadmap so they can communicate better with you. Are they going to try and take advantage of it? Maybe, but I've been finding that people have been, I think what's been happening recently has been breaking down a lot of barriers, and people are actually being nicer to one another with everything that's going on. Even when I venture out into the grocery store with my mask on every time, people are like, they're keeping their distance. They're asking, hey, how are you doing? I mean, they can't see me because I'm wearing my glasses and a mask, but they're still like actually taking the time to see, hey, how are you doing? So, there's always a risk that someone's going to take advantage. It is, but I think the benefits of being able to have an open, honest dialogue. And James, we talked about it the other day, getting recognition, how important it is. And people that you think would step up and say, hey, you're doing amazing work. It's completely goes right past them, and you're like, are you kidding me right now? Can you take 2 minutes? 2 minutes would be awesome. So I don't know. I think the PI is really important. So, I mean, it took me, 4 minutes to actually go through your PI, right? This is
the predictive index has basically 2 items, and it will take no more than 6 to 8 minutes to complete. It tells you, it spells out for you your natural behavioral drives. It tells you quite a bit about how you're adapting.
Right.
And when I say adapting, I mean how you perceive the need to show up to other people, how you think they expect you to behave. And it helps us diagnose if there's, adaptive tension. And those are the places where emotional intelligence skills can really be helpful. Things like problem solving, stress tolerance, reality testing. As a skill in emotional intelligence, reality testing is our ability to just kind of size up what is, as opposed to ruminating on how it should be and it isn't, or how we wish it, was like it used to be and it's not. We tend to kind of focus on the gap between what we'd like to see happen or what we expect should be happening and what is really happening. And that skill of reality testing allows us to zero in more on what's really happening. So that the predictive index gives us data to better inform, how we know that about ourselves.
That's interesting. So this is how my work and job used to be before COVID, BC. And this is what our new normal is. And I wanted to go back, or I wanted to change, but this is the reality we're stuck with now. And it helps them kind of cope with that. That's a really interesting point.
It is. This is what it is. And, keeping in mind that we have this capacity to identify what we feel and why we feel that way, that information is absolute power. It informs how we make decisions. And when it's not managed, so when we're not tuned into how we feel, it's in the background and it will hijack us in times of distress and disturbance.
Excuse me.
We see people becoming more of their pattern instead of kind of managing themselves in difficult situations like this, because they don't have any other way to cope. They're just defaulting, if that makes sense. So it's about adapting and learning how to adapt. For the HR people, I just want to say too, wow, this is just so unimaginable. All the things that we've been coping with and the drastic amount of change, but it's really not difficult or complex. I should say, it's not that it's not difficult, it's not complex. That we have to get really good at understanding what's happening here. Why am I reacting the way I am? What's the story behind that? That gives us opportunity then to challenge that story or change our tune about something. And when we can do that, then we're much more available to size up and understand what other people need. So yeah, off on a tangent.
No, because go ahead, James, go ahead.
Your recommendation that like Callum and I should share our Maverick to everybody in the world, or do it above, do it below, or just use it for yourself? Like, what's your recommendation?
Yeah,
that's a good question. Definitely be willing to share it, especially with people that you work closely with. And if you can share it from the perspective of, hey, I've now figured out about myself. This explains a lot about me. This explains about where I feel really strong and successful at what I do. And this also explains where I have trouble sometimes and where I know I create trouble for you. So now that I know that, I'm going to be able to work with that. I think the major component is to first appreciate, well, how do you need to leverage that information? For me, I'm a persuader, and I have this excessively high extroversion, which one of the things that comes along with that is a very strong need for social acceptance. So, I in the past have been known to look at calendars and say, wait, there's a meeting and I'm not included. Or in previous jobs where I really struggled was when I didn't have influence over a decision, or people didn't want my input, or I didn't have a seat at the table. Good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent, that's me. And my emotional intelligence skills have been deployed and are deployed regularly to help manage that. Because in the world, it's really not about me, but that's my big trigger. And when I can move that to the side, then I have access to the things I know I do really well. I listen to people, I'm collaborative, I like to create ideas and solutions. So the other stuff can get in the way of me being successful doing that. So sharing your information would be valuable, and do it after you've really watched yourself in action and learned a lot about how you can manage those behavioral drives.
So we talked to Tim Sackett on Wednesday. He does a lot of recruiting, headhunting. He was talking about companies now should take a moment to look at who they're bringing back.
Yes.
Let's see, how can we, for want of a better word, how can we get some upgrades? How can we come out of this a little bit faster, a little bit stronger? Mm-hmm. One of the guys I work with had to lay off 900 people And he said it's really interesting to see some of the people that got furloughed and hourly workers stepped up unasked while they're on furlough and stepped into leadership positions to try and keep people together and talking. And he went, we had no idea these guys had this capability, right? These are the guys we're bringing back. Could something like the PI help predict who those people will be if this happens again?
Absolutely. I love the fact that in a time of great dramatic change, people can shuffle around and they can show their true colors. I've heard other companies talk about that in the last 2 weeks, where they've been able, to find great talent. I will tell you that there are two things that really press upon engagement and success in work. The first is job fit, and research shows us that's the number one inhibitor of engagement and fulfillment at work, because people need to be able to do what they're naturally equipped and wired to do, as much of the time as they can. The second is manager fit. So in most of our organizations, where we're not doing very well is by placing people in the right seats and then equipping them to be successful by having them associated with the right manager. So we promote people who are not leadership worthy, nor are they even probably interested in managing others, and they're not self-aware. But we also have people working in positions that are not well suited for their natural behavioral drives. Predictive index directly addresses that. Let's figure out what we need in the role. Let's make sure the person who takes that seat is going to be successful in doing so.
So would you say that the PI is job specific, or it really depends on the culture of the company and who you're working with on your team?
Well, it does depend on the culture, the climate, and the expectations of that unique market that perhaps your industry resides in. But it is the job target itself, what the requirements are for the job. And I'm not talking about the briefcase part. So we talk about the head, the heart, and the briefcase. The briefcase is all the skills and abilities. I'm talking about the head part, like how this person works. Not necessarily what they have to do, but how they will do it. You have the opportunity to design that job target very specific to the role. Therefore, the match is much more accurate.
This is cool. Now, you've been working with a client, Matrix Technologies, in Ohio.
Yeah.
I know we're going to be a little bit short on time today. James got to leave us in a couple of minutes, but I want you to come back on with your young lady from Matrix. And now, what is it that company does? What do they do?
They are an engineering firm, technology and engineering firm.
Okay.
Best in class. I think they've hit the top 10 list of every certifiable publication and benchmark in their industry.
How long have they been using the PI for? They
are in their third year of using predictive index.
And what kind of progression have you seen from year 1 to year 3 by them doing this? What have been the changes, the tangible changes?
I would say initially the greatest success was in hiring, finding the right people. So we all know that there's an incredible cost to, especially in very specific technology-based firms. Finding, prior to COVID, finding great engineers was a very difficult thing. So making sure there's a good fit, and I think that was a direct impact using PI. So they boosted selection and onboarding process and retention by using it there. They've also used it quite a bit in developing their leadership team, and the leadership team then understanding their teams. So when the leadership team has a better cohesive working operation, they then have to take that and transfer it out into the organization. So these functional leaders have spent time now trying to understand and how to optimize their direct reports.
Okay, so
those are just two applications.
So less quicker decisions on hiring and less turnover.
Absolutely. Less drama too.
Well, no one wants drama.
No drama.
Unless you're my daughter, and she loves it. We'll not talk about that. So James, is there anything you want to ask before we have to close down on a Friday afternoon? Is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I guess my main question is, I'm trying to figure out, I get how it works isolated, but when you're combining it in a whole organization, are you building the leader around the team or the team around the leader?
Ooh.
That is a good question. It's really both and. It really entails both the leader understanding him or herself in relationship to those others on the team, but each individual employee has some responsibility, you know, for being as successful as they can be. It is about an individualized path, you know, of understanding and skill development. It's just informed by this data. Certainly, there are so many programs that are out there that we use in our organizations to develop teams. I love Lencioni's stuff. We use that a lot in terms of developing the high-performing team. But inside of all of that, it's each of us really understanding and being responsive to that data. So it can go broad scale, and it really should inform any people decisions made in an organization. It really cuts through well, I won't say that word. It makes hard decisions more transparent. It really informs by using data and science. It makes very clear what are the right paths for us to take when it comes to people, promoting people, developing people, having performance conversations with people. You know, when somebody isn't quite getting where they need to go, and you're frustrated, and you hear managers say, we've talked about this. You know, the PI can help a company diagnose what's missing in there, what's not being attended to. The data just really helps kind of clean and clear all that stuff away so that we can better find success with people.
Awesome. All right. So it's all about communication, right? Finding out pluses, minuses, what someone's love language is.
Yeah.
In respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. It's a good way to say it.
All right. Sarah, we need to have you come back on when there's more time. I definitely want to have the young lady from Matrix just to tell us her personal experience over a couple of years, because anything that can speed up a hiring process, bring back better people and reduce turnover for a corporation right now, based upon the amount of money they've lost, would be spectacular. So thanks for letting us know about emotional intelligence. We'll tag you on it, Dr. Travis Bradbury. Simon Sinek, and you're obviously with Integrate. James, anything else? Are we good?
Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
So smooth.
Good one.
Yeah, what James said. All right. We'll see you later. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.